This podcast is a product of the Florida Academy of Collaborative Professionals. Nothing in this podcast should be considered legal advice. To find a collaborative professional near you, visit www.collaborativepracticeflorida.com. Thank you. Today's FACP podcast guest is Chad Layton. Chad is a collaborative divorce attorney. His office is located in Palm Beach. He's one of the founding members of the Susan B. Greenberg Family Law Inns of Court in Palm Beach County. He has served on the foundation for the board of Palm Beach Flagler Rotary Club, and his area of practice is helping families navigate the process of divorce without fighting in court. And outside of the office, Chad is a Florida native born from Palm Beach County and a proud father of 2 daughters. And he's happily married to his wife, obviously, and he's a competitive tennis player. So thank you, Chad, for being the guest today on the podcast.
Good morning, Catherine. Thank you for having me.
I wanted to talk to you first. I want to find out, how did you begin practicing collaborative law? How did you find out about it? How did you decide this sounds good and this is going to help families?
Sure. For me, I started practicing family law about 15 years ago. And I came in as an associate, working and not knowing the practice of law and much other than just my degree from law school, and went right into family law and started litigating family law cases. Did that, I guess, back at the end of 2008, and did it for strong 10, 12 years. And as part of that, it became a grind on my end, and it became something that was not my passion. And I became married and had children, and just my outlook changed. And once I found out, I believe at a CLE about collaborative divorce, and it wasn't around, to my knowledge, when I first started practicing. And once I found it, it was something I was happy to look for a different way to handle divorce and family law. And so then I went ahead and signed up for the training.
So after litigating family cases for that many years and then learning about collaborative, explain what the difference is. I mean, what most people know about litigating is what they see on TV or in movies, and some of that is very accurate. But in collaborative, it's a very different style and technique. So would you explain a little bit about what's different and what happens in collaborative versus what happens in the courtroom?
Sure, absolutely. For me, it's something I describe as just a much better outcome at the end of the day, that the clients we help, ultimately they're seeking and need a divorce. So at the end of the day, they're going to achieve and receive that final judgment of dissolution of marriage, but we go about it completely different and collaborative. Some of the hallmarks of the collaborative process, as you know, we're looking at peaceful resolutions, private resolutions. So we don't start off in court. I'm a big proponent of starting off the way you want to end. So we start off by discussing what the goals are, and then ultimately reaching out to the spouse and start working with them to build a team and come up with solutions, rather than filing a lawsuit, right? And serving them with a process server and putting anybody on the defensive immediately. And as you know, when we're served with a process server, and what I did in litigation for many years, is you receive that petition for dissolution that you've never seen, and you immediately start seeing language that says, I want attorney's fees, I want spousal support, I want the world. Whether or not it really even applies to that case, my experiences in litigation, every single one, they're going to seek all of it, because as you know, sometimes attorneys worry about waiving those requests and they don't know at the outset. But when you're the husband or wife, you receive somebody at your door or your business, they're not always nice. Most of the time they're not, in my experience, and they're treating them poorly, and then they hand them this paperwork, you've been served, and the paperwork is scary, and then they're starting off in a very bad way to go through a divorce that I'm confident that's not the best way for people to go through it.
You mentioned that in the collaborative process, we gather a team. So let's talk about the team.
Sure.
So obviously, to have a collaborative case, you need two parties, and
Right.
then they each need an attorney. So you can't do a collaborative divorce with just one attorney. And I know sometimes people like to shortcut it and save fees. So they are all in as to the collaborative style, but they don't want two attorneys. And so let's talk a little bit about how you can have two attorneys and it still not be adversarial like it is when you litigate, when you have two collaborative attorneys. What have you found it? Do you still think it's adversarial? How can two people, when they each have their own attorney, still be in the collaborative, peaceful process?
Sure. And I agree. That's one of the areas that, hey, when you or I are meeting with prospective clients and we're talking to individuals about their options when they're going through divorce and we discuss collaborative, that's something they haven't heard about before. I, speak to many attorneys that don't know about it, more or less potential clients that you and I are speaking with. And that's one of the big hurdles of, hey, do I really need another attorney? And money matters. My experience is that early on, like a lot of things, early on, it makes more sense. And hey, let's try to get this done with one attorney. And then quickly, once you get to any issues that not everybody understands and where not everyone agrees, then suddenly you realize you really do need that other attorney. And you need somebody in the room that can be on the team and can explain to their own client what's going on, what the law is, and how we can come up with some good option building, as we talk about all the time, and collaborative divorce. Um, and so for me, my experience has been very good with the attorneys and collaborative divorce, and they're needed. And as you said, we can't really do it without that other attorney, but it's one of those that, divorce is hard, and that's one of those where you're just kind of looking to take a shortcut. And I understand it. Like you say, it makes sense logically for a lot of people, but for us as professionals, and we've gone through the collaborative training, they've built it that way for a reason. And the collaborative attorneys really do a good job of certainly not adversarial, and they're just able to give each spouse their own attorney, which they need. And I think that brings to each spouse a lot of confidence in the process and just somebody that they can rely on to be their own attorney. So it helps everybody out. And for us as the collaborative professionals, it makes my job much more straightforward, and I can do a better job of just working with the husband or wife and having you work with the other spouse and us working together to come up with how we can help them.
And that is the difference. We're helping them where, you know, they're adverse to each other and don't want to be together anymore. And they don't want to be financially entangled or emotionally entangled, living under the same roof or whatever their issues are that need to be resolved. So when we have this collaborative effort, we're option building, as you said. So explain a little bit about option building and how that works in the collaborative process. You know, when people listening say option building, what is that? So what is that, Chad? What do you
Sure.
when I
Yeah.
say option building, you say option build, we know what it is, but I think people listening may not understand what we're talking about.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Option building is it's a big change, and I think it's a big benefit to the collaborative process. One of another, there's many kind of advantages to the collaborative process, and one of the big advantages is husbands and wives and families aren't going in front of a judge and asking a judge to figure out how they're going to handle this family's finances, minor children, and just everything that goes on with their family, and telling them how to move forward with their life and who's getting what. So we don't do that, right? In the collaborative process, we sign a participation agreement and we agree at the outset that we're not going to go to court. If the parties decide to go to court, we can't as attorneys. We are disqualified. So then that puts us in a position as we go forward, we're inevitably going to run into some issues in some areas where the husband and wife are not seeing eye to eye. They're getting divorced and we don't agree on everything. So we as the professional team need to be able to help them and provide benefit to the process. And a big part of that is helping them with the option building of, hey, we're looking at a home that you all have lived in for 20 years. And now you're not going to live together anymore. So we know that we're not just going to continue to stay living in this home. How are we going to come up with a solution for your marital home, which many times is a big asset? And what are our options, right? Do we want to sell this home? Do we want dad to stay in the home or the husband to stay in the home? Do we want wife to stay in the home? And if so, how are we going to pay the other spouse a fair amount for their interest that they own in the home, and start building those options, right? And that's really where the collaborative process starts to shine, in my opinion, of where you can talk through and come up with some really educated options for both spouses, and then let them choose which we talk about a lot, where they have control in the collaborative process versus a judge or an attorney that's kind of driving the ship.
I think you're right in that what the professionals are doing is asking those questions. How do you want to handle the house? How do you want to handle extracurricular activities for the children? Are you still going to be able to afford, horseback riding? Are you still going to be able to afford summer camp? I think option building is really the professionals asking all these questions and then hearing from the parties as to how they'd like it to be, and then circling back and trying to help them get there and figure out if that option is financially feasible and how the other party feels about that potential option. So I think that they have us as a sounding board, but really all we're doing is asking them questions. What do you think? Is that?
Yeah, I agree. I think we're certainly there to help. A lot of times we don't know what we don't know, right? So asking questions of,
I've been
if
saying that all year. I know
we,
it's only a month now, but that's my
yeah,
new phrase. I don't know what I don't know.
right. And the people we're helping certainly don't know a lot about the divorce process. They're not supposed to. They didn't go to school for it. They haven't been trained in it. So I think a big point that we focus on is making sure that we raise those questions for them, and make sure we're addressing the entire divorce process, and that we're going to leave them in a position where they don't have problems at the end of the day and questions afterwards of, hey, we didn't deal with this. That's our job to raise all of that. And then another area for that I see a lot of times, and I think we're able to help people, is, in the collaborative process, we're attracting those clients that are more so the clients that don't want to go to war. They're not the clients that we've seen before. There's a certain amount of people that they want to exact revenge on their spouse. They really want to go after their spouse, and that's I don't think it's a good thing, but it happens. It's part of life. Collaborative divorce is not going to be a good tool for them. But many people that do want to come up with what's fair, that's something that's a loaded question, I think, but it's something that we can help. And I've been working more and more on that with clients, of they really do want a fair resolution, but they don't know what that is. So I think we can bring a lot of value on that side of things, of using the law, right? We know what the law says, and how support obligations and equitable distribution, and how we can ultimately identify all of their assets and liabilities and help them split all of that up in a fair manner. They don't know what that is. And I think we help a lot with that by saying, hey, we do have the law here. We're trained lawyers. We're going to help you apply the law to your case and come up with a fair resolution. And that's a good client to work with. Those are the clients you and I love to see, of they really want fair, but they don't know what fair is.
Let's talk about a little bit about clients that may or not be suited for collaborative, as you're saying. So you explain that, but collaborative isn't always easy issues. I mean, collaborative can work for people who really are adverse and who have some really tricky things. So you've seen that, I'm sure, that the collaborative process can actually help those couples that are adverse and don't see things the same way and have very different ideas. So you want to talk a little bit about how the collaborative process can actually benefit those people who have really drifted apart and have a different style of what's fair, what's equitable, how things should be?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those recently, within the past 6 months, we had a judge come in and speak to us and talk a little bit about the three percenters. I believe it was Judge Martz down in South County, talked about the three percenters, as his office called them. And that's the actual number of cases and people that end up at a divorce trial, the three percenters. So it tells us, our math says 97% don't end up in trial. So if you're not going to end up in trial, then we have a large number of people that are going to get a resolution outside of the judge deciding it and outside of the trial. So to me, that opens up the door to 97% of the divorce cases. We can certainly help through the collaborative process, because in collaborative, we can't go to trial and we won't go to trial. But if we have the opportunity to help 97% of people, what we can do is work with them and bring those team members, a mental health professional and a facilitator that will help us identify those areas of conflict, build out the options, and really help those individuals. So yeah, I agree with you that just because people really have grown apart and don't like each other one bit and don't agree, is the court system going to be something that helps them? For me, no. I think in the collaborative process, we can identify that. The attorneys can really do their job to identify what a fair resolution is and look to help them save a lot of time and money. And just because they don't like one another, it doesn't mean that they still can't sit down, and look at it and find what's going to be a fair resolution under the law and move on with their life, rather than say, hey, we're going to fight for 2 years in court and spend, 5 times the amount of dollars to come up with a resolution. I think that's where the collaborative process can help those individuals, where we can just say, hey, I don't like this and I don't want to handle it, but if I'm going to have to, what's my best option? And I think collaborative gives them that ability to just save time and money and move on.
It's interesting to hear that phrase, the 3%ers, that the judge coined and brought to everyone's attention. When it comes December, the end of the year, and a new case is started, I always am curious to see what the number, and I've found over years that just in Palm Beach County, there's usually about at least 10,000 new cases every year, meaning it's either a divorce or a paternity. Those are the ones that are put together in the family division. So if there's 10,000 new cases every year and only 3% of them are really going to trial, that's a lot of people who are resolving these cases without the judge. I can't do the math, even though I say that's why I went to law school. So because I didn't want to do math, but in family, I do math down to the penny, it seems. But that's a lot of people out there that are available really to use the collaborative process instead of ending up in court.
Sure, I agree. And there's very few people I've come across that want to go sit in front of a judge and sit down for depositions and sit down for hearings and go through that tough grind of litigation. That if they have the option and they've really had all of their different options explained to them and they're aware of that, for the most part, they don't want to choose litigation. You end up in litigation kind of because you have to, and that's okay. If you have to, you have to. But if you don't have to, for me, your better outcome is going to be collaborative, close to 97% of the time.
What I think people don't understand either is there's a lot of decisions that they need to make in the divorce process that a judge would never consider, but still they need to make these decisions. So have you found in your collaborative cases that there's issues and things that parties are working out and deciding that a judge you'd never bring in front of a judge? Like who gets grandma's, silver this, or, what happens to the wedding gifts that are 10 years old or 2 years old, things like that.
Absolutely. Yeah, no question. I have one where, as I'm sure you've seen, but it's helpful, many families where they have children, just because they're over the age of 18, they're still children, right? And the court generally looks at minor children as the age of 18 or graduated from high school. And at that point, they're not really going to address that. Being the judge is not going to address how we're going to deal with college and how we're going to deal with the ongoing financial expense for these children. In collaborative, it's something that the clients and the parents have the ability to say, hey, we know our son or daughter is already 21, and guess what? There's a lot of expenses and a lot of work we're still doing to help them. Let's work on that. And we bring that right into the collaborative process and build a plan that the parties agree to. And that really works for something that's really important to them, being their adult children that still need financial help. that's something I think that is a big advantage to the collaborative process. There's many more, as you said, that's whatever is unique to that family. We can really address that for them and help them where the judge, they can't. They're going to go by the law, and they have to go by the law. And when you start to talk about children that are 20 years old in the courtroom, the judge is going to stop us very quickly and say, no, we're not here to hear that today.
I always say that you never know who comes through your office. It's a family that comes in. So there's a lot of different issues as to things that they're trying to resolve. Are you using collaborative in other areas?
I have not. I've read about it, and I know collaborative is something that can really be helpful in estate planning and other issues. But I have not used it in any other areas. But it seems to me that it's a great fit. I know that estate planning, especially even estate litigation, where families are really battling over monies that have been left by parents, grandparents, it can really be similar to what we do in divorce, where those relationships between siblings and other family members can get in the way. And I think collaborative is a very good fit for them, because again, their other option is to go and fight in court. That I don't think is going to help them one bit. I know it will take a lot more time and money. So that's an area that I see as a really good fit, but I'm sure there's many others. But for me, I've done it just with family law and handle just those matters.
And you touched on that. What's different and why collaborative is important, I think, is because the parties are family, whether they're, getting a divorce or, as you said, in estate litigation. That's different from a traditional landlord tenant or it's commercial, one
Right.
company versus another company, or a builder, or, even a personal injury when you're dealing with insurance companies. We deal with families and with people. So having this process, I think, is really important.
Oh, I agree. And I raised that many times of, we're not dealing with a former business partner and somebody that we don't really have a relationship with. That, we're dealing with our client, but the other client and part of the family is their spouse. And that's somebody that you had a very strong relationship with at some time, and many times built a life with them. That's different. And that's where, many of us as collaborative practitioners would say that the courtroom is not a good tool to help them unwind that relationship and come up with solutions that, a lot of times we talk about going forward after the divorce. And litigation, rarely do you hear the parties or the attorneys talk about what's going to happen in the future. They're just getting through this battle. They're getting through this hearing. They're getting through this. In collaborative, we talk all the time about, what are we going to plan for down the road when you all have grandchildren and college graduations and areas where your relationship still matters after the divorce, and how can we kind of allow the family to go forward without just really having that vindictiveness and nasty divorce that it's not helping anybody. I think collaborative really helps families that way by planning for the future and just working together.
Okay. Well, thank you for being on the podcast today. We
Thank you,
appreciate your
Catherine.
input.
I appreciate it. It was good to speak with you.